As modernism and its influence spread across the world in the early 1900s, new art and design factions emerged throughout cultures. Today, we're exploring Constructivism, a Russian art and architecture movement that brought abstraction to the country. Good day, everyone. I am Jerwin Manabat, and along with my groupmate, which is Heidi Yeklak, let's learn more about this short-lived and industrial-heavy movement in this report. Before we proceed to the art movement that was born out of revolution, let's look at its precedents. By 1915, the Russian avant-garde had pioneered entirely new approaches to art in three dimensions. Today, we have the phrase "think outside the box." They were so far outside the box that they tore up the box and put it in the recycling bin. Tatlin was the first great innovator using industrial materials suspended at the corner of the wall. The title of this series shows us how innovative his thinking was. It is called a corner counter belief because it is suspended in the corner of the room. But instead of using a sculpture, marble, bronze, or clay, he is constructing industrial materials and he is in doing that pioneering a new way to think as an artist about situating forms in relation to the real world. And Tatlin then becomes the founder of Constructivism as a movement in art in which relation to the real world. And Tatlin then becomes the founder of Constructivism as a movement in art in which instead of making sculpture, the Russian avant-garde is now constructing industrial materials in space. So constructivism goes with the ideas of building, planning, and establishing systems. Chapter 2: Background History. The Constructivism movement was one of the most influential modern art movements in the early 20th century. It flourished in Russia and was inspired by revolution. At its heart, it was a movement inspired by the idea of change and revolution. These abstract concepts seek to abolish the designed symmetry and traditional composition with something more industrial and man-made. This is why it is called the Constructivism movement, because it is inspired by the idea of constructing newer goods and products using mass production by exploring modern materials. In the end, this movement feathered out and stopped gaining momentum because there was a huge wave of hostility for any avant-garde in the Bolshevik regime. Let's take a look at how this movement affected the architecture and design world. Constructivism was popularized in the 1910 Soviet Union, the same period that the Bauhaus and the Steel movements emerged across Eastern Europe. Constructivism was largely inspired by other modern, innovative developments of the time, specifically Bauhaus and Russian Futurism. Constructivist artists strive to reflect the industrialization of urban society in their work. The movement's art and architectural works combined characteristics from existing modern principles such as geometric and minimal design, but with a more experimental approach, often staying away from ornate decorative elements. Constructivist architecture instead favored mechanical and industrial materials. This design direction also focused on space and rhythm, frequently resulting in futuristic and abstract presenting structures.
So here are the architectural examples of the constructivist architecture. So first we have the Zhoyev Workers Club in Moscow. So it is a prominent work of constructivist architecture. It was designed by Ilya Golzov from 1927 and it finished in 1929. So it is designed to house various facilities in Moscow for Moscow workers and utilizes an innovative glazing treatment at its corner which has proved very photogenic. So Golazov was an enthusiast for expressive dynamic form rather than the logic of constructivist design methods. The building facade consists of cylindrical glazed staircases intersecting with stacked rectangular floor plans to create a dramatic composition. It is a sequence of club rooms and open foyers lead to an 850-seat auditorium. Since Golozov's time, some of the fenestration has been brick over, reducing the original perforated cubic mass into a more solid box. So here is the building. So on the left side is the Zoo Workers Club in 1921, while on the right side is in year 2016. Next, we have the Rosakov Workers Club. It is also in Moscow. So it is a notable example of constructivist architecture, and it is designed by Konstantin Melnikov from 1927 to 1928. So the club is built on a fan-shaped plan with three cantilevered concrete seating areas rising above the base. Each of these volumes can be used as a separate auditorium, and combined they result in a capacity of over 1,000 people. At the rear of the building are more conventional offices. The only visible materials used in its construction are concrete, brick, and glass. The function of the building is to some extent expressed in the exterior, which Meldikov described as a tense cell. And last, we have the Tatlins Tower in Petrograd. So it is also called the Project for the Monument to the Third International from 1919 to 1920. So it was a design for a grand monumental building by the Russian artist and architect Vladimir Tatlin. It was planned to be erected in Petrograd, or now called St. Petersburg, after the October Revolution of 1917 as the headquarters and monument of the Communist International, or the Third International. It is built from industrial materials such as iron, glass, and steel. In materials, shape, and function, it was envisaged as a towering symbol of modernity. It would have dwarfed the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The tower's main form was a twin helix which spiraled up to 400 m or 1,300 feet in height, around which visitors would be transported with the aid of various mechanical devices. So Tatlin's tower was critical to Soviet propaganda. Symbolically, the tower is said to represent the aspirations of its originating country and a challenge to the Eiffel Tower as the foremost symbol of modernity. Soviet critic Viktor Skolovsky is said to have called it a monument made of steel, glass, and revolution. Next is the constructivist in interior design. So, constructivism is a restrained and laconic interior style that originated in Russia in the 20s. It became a kind of reflection of the political changes taking place in the country. Constructivism is based on the desire to rationalize living space as much as possible. For history, constructivism as an interior style appeared in Russia in the early 20s of the 20th century. It became a response and at the same time a contrast to the luxurious bourgeois style. The idea of constructivism was based on the maximum functionality of each interior item and the almost complete absence of decorative elements. At the same time, the emphasis was placed on maximum openness of space, convenience, and simplicity. The characteristic features of the style are clear line, straight lines, con- contrasting colors, and strict geometry forms. For the color scheme, in constructivism, plain prints are dominant. At the same time, often accents on a particular interior detail are made using contrasting colors. White is often used as a basis. It is often used with different shades of gray, red, light green, and classic black. In finishing materials, much attention is paid to the practicality of all interior elements. As a result, appropriate materials are selected. These are mostly metal, plastic, and glass. However, for example, low-cost wood can be used for flooring. With regards to furniture, despite the fact that constructivism involves large spaces without clear zoning, furniture in the interior is often not used so much. Sofas, armchairs, tables, and cabinets, all items of furniture perform their direct function. At the same time, they completely lack any decorative elements, whether it is carved sofa legs or a color print on the upholstery of the sofa. The furniture is simple, rigorous, and convenient forms. The functions assigned to each subject are very clear, no gorgeous luxuries. Simplicity is brought to the limit to such simplification when things, chairs, beds, cabinets, are simply objects to sleep sitting. And lastly, for decor and accessories, the interior in the style of constructivism is quite laconic. There is no room for unnecessary details. All space should be used as efficiently as possible. Therefore, each piece of decor has its own functional purpose. Constructivism today. So, over time, constructivism has undergone a number of changes, but the style remains popular today. With the advent of new technologies, functionality has been added to the interior. For example, today preference is given to built-in appliances and furniture. This approach allows you to make the interior more modern, adhering to the more fundamental principles of style. The end and its legacy. The end of constructivism. So the 1932 competition for the Palace of the Soviets, aiming to rival the Empire State Building, attracted interest from major constructivist architects like Walter Gropius, Erich Mendelssohn, and Le Corbusier. However, modernism faced criticism in the still mostly agrarian Soviet Union for being impractical and merely copying technological forms with routine construction methods. Boris Lova's winning entry marked the shift to eclectic historicism and Stalinist architecture, resembling postmodernism in its reaction against modernist cosmopolitanism. Housing projects reflecting 1920s social reforms fell out of favor with the rise of Stalinism and a return to traditional family values. The Moscow Metro popularized the concept of worker palaces. By the late 1920s, constructivism then dominated Soviet architecture, blending with classicism in a style sometimes called post-constructivism. Neoclassical reaction prevailed until 1955, with rationalist buildings persisting in industrial but not urban projects. Isolated constructivist buildings appeared until 1935, while some modernist elements lingered in competition entries and socialist realist works like Lufan's 1937 Paris Pavilion with futurist elevations. Legacy. High-tech architecture also owes a debt to constructivism, most obviously in Richard Rogers Lloyd's building. Zaha Hadid's early project, influenced by Malevich architectons and Chernikov's drawings, also reflect constructivist inspiration. The constructivism seen in Kopp Himmel's work captures constructivism's dynamism but lacks its social aspect. In the late 1970s, Rem Koolhaas wrote a parable, The Story of the Pool, illustrating constructivists fleeing the USSR in a self-powering modernist swimming pool, facing criticism similar to the under Stalinism upon reaching the USA. Meanwhile, many of the original constructivist buildings are poorly preserved or in danger of imminent demolition. And that's all for our presentation. Thank you for listening.